So, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining the Thriving Dentist June webinar, Digital Dentistry that increases production and profit. I'm your host for this session, Don Adisha, and today we are having a very practical conversation about 3D printing, cloud systems, tax strategy, and the real business math behind digital dentistry. It's going to be an exciting one for sure. Very interesting perspectives on a very timely topic. Now, a few quick housekeeping notes before we begin to ensure that you make the best of this hour. First up, yes, we are recording, so you will receive a replay link after the event in your inbox, and you can go ahead and share that with your colleagues and partners. But do not let that make you passive because the real value is happening right here, right now, live. So do make the best use of your time by engaging with us via the Q&A box. If you have any questions, any specific questions you want me to ask the panelists, it's easier for me to pick it off out of the Q&A box there. Or you can use the chat to go ahead and have an engaging conversation with your colleagues, right? Share your thoughts and your reflections. Now, I'll have my eye on both the feeds and will do my best to weave in your input as we go along. Or else, with regards to your questions, we might just tackle them head on through a dedicated Ask Me Anything sort of session a bit later down the event. Now, this session is CE eligible, so the CE form will be shared at the end. And we will also be sharing a resource link partway through as well. So keep an eye out for that. Now, today's webinar is proudly sponsored by Echo Marketing. Echo Marketing is founded by the very same co-host of the Thriving Dentist podcast, Naren Arulraja. And for nearly 20 years, Echo has helped growth-focused dental practices attract the right patients, strengthen case acceptance, and build more predictable production. Now, we will be hearing more from Echo a little bit later in the program. So with that being said, let's go ahead and meet our experts of the evening. First up, we have Dr. Tarun Agarwal. Dr. Agarwal brings the clinical and workflow lens today. He's going to help us separate impressive technology from technology that actually performs chairside. So what teams underuse, where workflows break, and what makes same-day dentistry reliable enough to create production. So Dr. Agarwal, thank you very much for being here on the panel.
You, Don. Thanks for having me. I look forward to a nice conversation today.
Absolutely, likewise. Now, next up, we have Eric Jacek. Eric brings the system lens. He focuses on the infrastructure behind the modern practice, performance, cloud migration, staff experience, visibility, and whether a system actually makes ownership more informed instead of just more digital. Eric, it's great to have you on the panel.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. And rounding out the panel for this evening is Alexis Galati. Alexis brings the financial and tax strategy lens. She's here to help us make the distinction that matters a lot in this conversation, the financial one. A purchase can create a deduction and still be a poor investment if the business math, timing, and patient demand assumptions are wrong. So, Alexis, it's great to have you, and we're really looking forward to your insight.
Thank you, Don. I really appreciate you having me here.
Absolutely. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the main discussion. Seems that my first question is to you, Dr. Agarwal. Most practices own at least one digital tool that they underuse. What actually breaks down between the purchase decision and the point where the technology earns its keep? Over to you.
Yeah, so I think on that question, probably I want to answer it a few ways. Oh, shit. Sorry. Couple is one is I think the most underutilized technology in a dental practice is probably going to be the digital scanner. And the reason I say that is everything is downstream from the digital scanner. If you don't take scans, you can't do digital dentistry. So taking the digital scans is important. And what do I mean by underutilized? Most people look at the digital scanner as a dentist tool, and I don't believe it to be a dentist tool. I believe it to be a hygienist tool, probably first and foremost. So in our office, we have digital scanners with our hygienists that allows them to take digital scans on the vast majority, if not all of our patients. And then from there, when we're ready to do treatment, it becomes quicker, faster, everything's ready to go. So that's kind of my view on the digital scanner. Now, why does this happen? One is the mindset. Most people, when they're making these buying decisions, it's usually a one-sided buying decision. The dentist goes to a program, the dentist buys it, the dentist, unknowingly makes it from their lens only. So kind of everything, the lack of utilization starts there. I'm looking at it from my perspective, buying it for me, only think about what I do. The training is for me, but training's for me and my assistant. And then when I get back to the office, I get hit with Monday morning, the busyness, and all of those things. And really, it never gets started into using it for more and more people in the practice. And it kind of dies at that point in time.
Okay. Now, how do you, since you showed us what the problem is because the dentist
Mm.
goes out of their way and they make the purchasing decision on their own. What do you think would be a better workflow for that when it comes to purchasing decision and getting your team's buy-in as well?
Well, I'm very selfish on the purchasing decision. At the end of the day, it
Okay.
is my money. So, so I want to make the decision on what makes sense for me.
That's
But
right.
that being said, what I have found in my career is that when I have the support of my team members in my decision, if they're involved in the decision, I feel more confident in coming back and implementing into the office and having a training plan of how I'm going to train more than just myself, but train other team members. How am I going to outsource that? How am I going to get myself out of the way so that we can do the training? That becomes important. And a lot of that honestly falls on who are you buying this from? Do they have a training program in place? Do they have the resources to allow you to train? Do they have the community of others that you can lean on? Or are we going to keep dentistry on an island where the individual dentist is kind of on their own, just trying to figure it out in our own little bubble? And these are the results we get when we don't form a community.
Okay. Got that. Appreciate that, Dr. Agarwal. And here at Thrive Dentistry, we are big on that community.
Yeah.
So really appreciate the overview on that. Now, Eric, my next question is over to you. When a cloud migration goes wrong mid-weekend, the staff member who discovers the data problem on Monday morning takes the hit. What does that moment look like and what made it avoidable?
Well, first of all, it's never happened in my, I'm just kidding. No, it happens more frequently than I admit. It is a tough transition. So we do migrate data over the weekend. So Monday morning is a big bang kind of go live. It is very much about preparation, using technology to be able to sanitize and check the quality of the data. So data from one practice management system to another doesn't necessarily equate, and oftentimes it requires interpretation to figure out what goes where. In the old days, it used to be you would pull a bunch of patient records, you convert the data, and then you'd ask somebody from the customer side to review it over the weekend, which is makes you the biggest fan in the world of the actual practice itself because they have to work on the weekend and look at patient records that converted. So technology, thankfully, allows you to use things like AI, mapping tools, review tools in order to basically check to see if that data transitioned or converted appropriately. So and you take a lot of the burden off of the actual customer itself, and you can do some testing and some review kind of pre and post conversion during the weekend. So it oftentimes it hits the user in the first morning. They're expecting the patient to come in. They know the patient from the old system. They come in. Some of the data of the patient isn't converted. The chart's not converted right, and it's hard because any type of change or any type of shift from one system to another is not always easy within a dental office. So we try very much to use technology to solve that.
Okay. Can you get a little bit into the how of it?
Yeah, so data conversions used to be kind of just around like this field is in this field. So you take it from this database to this database. A simple example might be a date format of an old field might be 4 characters in the year and 2 characters in your new system. Well, the system used to be before you could use technology, someone would have to look at that and say, well, this is a date field and this is a date field. There's a very simple example. There are much more complex ones. But at the end of the day, now we don't have to do that. And instead of the customer coming back and saying, or us catching it and saying, hey, look, I think this is a date field. I think this is a date field. Can you confirm it? AI technology can go make the determination, pump it through the system, and we can review it much faster, which takes a lot of burden off the customer itself.
So you use AI systems to really filter it out.
Yeah, exactly. Or just do the interpretation of the data. So think about it, it's like it's never going to be perfect, like tooth number to tooth number. If you train the models to be able to do that, they can do it not quite as effectively as somebody who's got 20 years of experience in the practice management software, but they can do it well enough.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Eric. Now, Alexis, a lot of doctors approach a major equipment purchase as a write-off, and a business decision second. So many do not even know how the purchase will be treated for tax until after they have signed. So what is the difference between getting a deduction and making a smart long-term investment? And where does that confusion cost a practice real money?
Yeah, definitely the confusion is around what is a deduction versus a credit. So a lot of docs, they'll buy a piece of equipment and they'll think, oh, great, I've just spent $100,000. That means I'm going to get $100,000 off of my taxes. Well, these are deductions. So that means that that $100,000 is actually just lowering your taxable income. And so if you're, let's say, at the 35% bracket, making the math easy, that means that you're saving about $35,000 in tax. But you still have about $65,000 of spend that you've now had. And so you have to now take that 65,000 in spend and make sure that you have enough ROI through efficiencies and production in order to, make it a worthwhile investment. So that's where there's a little bit of a misalignment, not only with how it's treated, but then also you got to think about cash flow as well. So if the doc goes and buys equipment in December, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be placing it in service for one thing in December, and you also won't be having cash flow. You'll be having cash flow issues come January and February because you made this huge purchase, and so you won't have the liquid capital or to keep going and paying for other services. Now, of course, you have this like shiny new toy. That's great, but again, it's not really producing a full $100,000 loss, or tax savings.
How can we avoid this, Alexis? How can we proactively avoid making decisions like that?
Well, you have to go and look at the full aspect of your finances. And so, yes, the tax savings is nice, but you can't let the tax tail wag the dog, as the old saying goes. You have to make sure that this is an asset or a piece of equipment, for example, that will actually produce revenue within your business, that your clientele is actually looking for, and that you can actually support as well. You have to make sure that you're taking into account the additional training that's going to have to go into it, because that piece of equipment isn't going to be 100% operational as a day one.
It's going to take some time to ramp up, and you have to take that into consideration as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
Right. So, Dr. Agarwal, walk through the moment a crown prep scan fails mid-appointment. What does a team with real fallback protocol do differently in that chair, in that room, in the next 2 minutes?
Well, the not so fun answer is going to be we pull out a different scanner and take the impression with another scanner,
That's right.
because your practice has multiple scanners, not for failure.
Ideally.
But if I go back to my message that I believe digital scanners should be in every operatory, I can just go to another operatory and borrow a scanner, plug it in, and go to work. But honestly, at that point, you need to be able to take if it's the only scanner is truly not working, you have to move to polyvinyl impressions. And so we have to have these prepared, and so or have these readily available. Outside of that, it's troubleshooting, it's being able to call support, it's being able to kind of figure out on the fly what are my options. But essentially, the options are make your scanner work, use a different scanner, or use an analog method of being able to fix the problem that you have. There's not too many
Now,
choices here.
yeah, now the analog method, Dr. Agarwal, I'm no doctor. Uh, does that take a lot of time to prepare?
No, look, no. The answer is no. I mean, one, you have to have the materials. You have to have the materials. They have to be like one of the challenges I would run into is my materials probably expired at this point. We use them so little, the analog materials. But no, this is how we did dentistry for 150, 200 years. So suddenly we can't forget that this is how we do it in the event that some piece of technology that runs on electricity, that runs on an internet connection, that runs on, everything working, a driver not going out of date. We have to have some backup capabilities in our practice. It doesn't have to be as expensive as a backup scanner that's being used for other things, but polyvinyl material certainly is still our friend in these situations.
Okay, that's really a lot of props to classic dentistry and old school dentists. Now, Dr. Agarwal, you meant troubleshooting and calling support. Would you recommend that option to be done during this fail out when the patient is in the chair or after the
Well, yeah,
fact?
of course. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're doing single visit dentistry or we're trying to keep it digital, I would like to look, taking an impression isn't a life or death situation. My patient's not bleeding out, my patient's not doing any of those things. So we can probably pause for 5, 10, 15 minutes. Maybe we get behind. But I always have the motto that what can we do to save the day? My patient came in expecting to walk out with a permanent crown today. If I have to slow down 5, 10, 15 minutes, do a reboot, reset, allow somebody to log in today's world, they just log right into the machine, troubleshoot. And so, like, take a deep breath, slow down, and let's figure out a way to save our patient the visit that they're there for to begin with.
That's right. Thank you very much for that clarification, Dr. Agarwal. Now, Eric, when staff are excluded from a technology selection, like we spoke about earlier with Dr. Agarwal, and the new system goes live anyways, the resistance shows up in specific daily moments. Where does that friction surface first, and who feels it?
It's usually the person who says the software doesn't work. It's oftentimes it's either the front desk or usually the back office staff in an office. But the person I think who feels it most acutely is actually the dentist, because not because the dentist is using the software as much, or that if you think about practice management software and the clinical workflow and the treatment planning, probably more of it's actually done by either the hygienist or the front desk or the back office. It's because that person who's worked with the front desk or back office person for many years is getting an earful about how bad the system is and all the things it does work. So it's critical to do that. Particularly, we work with a lot of DSOs. It's critical you get buy-in from at the doctor level, because the doctor has tremendous influence over the actual staff itself. And once there's buy-in in terms of the overall benefit, then it tends to smooth over some of that change. But in change, as we discussed earlier, it's hard. It's not popular in healthcare in general and dentistry. It's like oftentimes it's been a kind of an antiquated technology universe when it comes to practice management software. And some of the people have used the software for 20 years, and asking them to click here versus click here is much more impactful than probably the average layman thinks. So we have to be thoughtful about that. We have to continuously reinforce the value. We have to tell them it will be better. This is just a temporary thing. And at the end of the day, here are the 5 or 6 cool things you get to do because you're on a new modern practice management software. But I would say it's probably the dentist that feels it the most in those situations.
5 or 6 cool things. What do you mean by that? Like, how would you phrase it in a way that you can really get the buy-in from the
Yeah,
dentist?
probably not in that way. 5 or 6, but the 5 or 6 cool things we do, it's like being on a modern practice management system allows for a lot of automation. So it allows for the system to help you do your job better. A simple example is like it used to be a world in which you couldn't text from your practice management software because it was old. You have to go into a separate system to text your patient. Now, when you have a cloud-based system like ours or any other, you're able to actually go and text your patient and see that. So Like that's a net benefit. Everyone loves that feature, but they don't love the fact that adding a patient was here, and now it's right over here. And so you have to just reinforce the value of what you're bringing because the change itself is never popular.
Check. Appreciate that example. That clarifies it a lot. Now, I do want to slow down here and do something a bit different. Instead of moving to a new topic, we're going to put one machine on the table, do a little bit of a case study, if you will. $120,000 milling system. Let's take a look at it through two lenses back to back. Alexis, this is your first stretch. First, the business math. At the point where a practice owner sits down to build a break-even model for $120,000 milling system, what assumptions do most doctors get wrong first?
Yeah, the first real assumption that tends to be incorrectly looked at is that they're looking at the total annual lab savings versus the annualized cost of the machine. Because again, they're assuming that the transition's going to be instantaneous and frictionless. So what they fail to account for, again, is that ramp up period and the learning curve. So, seeing what they can, how many patients they can start using that new piece of equipment with, doing all the training. So, that $120,000 piece of equipment isn't going to be operating at peak capacity day one. And so, you have to make sure that you're not completely ignoring the drop in production during staff training, ruined blocks and any sort of troubleshooting, especially in that first 60 to 90 days.
Okay. Now, Dr. Agarwal, you have placed machines like this in real practices. Does that match the math you actually see doctors run before they buy?
Yeah, it's certainly an important part of the picture. A $120,000 machine isn't 120 grand. There's some training to it. There's some ramp up period. Some of the ways that you can, and I'm not saying these are sound financial choices, but some of the ways to mitigate the ramp up period is to do a skip on your payments. A lot of the options will give you a 3-4 month period where you make interest only payments or you make no payments for 6 months, allowing you to have that time to get the equipment integrated into your practice. Again, I'm not saying that's a wise financial decision, but it is a choice. And then, look, I look at technology probably differently than most dentists. I'm going to look at it as I'm going to measure success of technology on our number one overhead in the practice, which is doctor chair time. The doctor chair time is the most expensive item in any dental practice P&L. And so if I can save an hour, that machine is suddenly worth $2,000 to me or $1,000 or $800 per hour that I save. And I also look at technology from the lens of, is it going to allow me to add new dentistry to my my tool belt? Am I going to be able to do new procedures that I wasn't doing before? Is it going to allow me to start dentistry faster? Is it going to allow me to finish dentistry faster? And is it going to give me an economic competitive advantage? And what I mean by that, does it lower my cost of goods so that way I can be a little bit more flexible with my patients? Can I be a little bit more competitive in the market? So when technology fills those lenses, it's almost always a great option for your practice to add technology. And just one clarification, the $120,000 milling machine isn't a $120,000 milling machine. It's a scanner and a milling unit. So the scanner has use in more than just one operatory. The milling unit, obviously, it has a use for fabricating restorations.
There we go. Another underused scanner, even in the question itself. Dr. Agarwal, I was just curious, why do you look at it differently? What made you stop looking at it from the traditional manner and focus more on this doctor chair time?
Yeah, because well, look, I've been using these chairside systems that were 80,000 when I started, 120, $140,000 along the way, and I have three of them in our practice. So we have we have 4 milling units in our practice, but three of them for chairside. Um, and look, in 2003 when I started, all ceramic crowns were $250 from the lab. the lab analogy made a lot of sense. I buy a $25 block, I skip a $250 lab bill. The economics are pretty easy to figure out. But now we're living in a world where all ceramic crowns, zirconia, if you consider those ceramics, uh, white tooth colored crowns at $79, $89, and your block is $25, $30. And it's so the economics became more difficult from the lab bills perspective. So you have to start looking at it differently. And the other thing that changed is the scope of dentistry I was providing or wanted to provide and or was providing my patients were demanding changed. So you have to start looking at technology from a different lens, because if we look at it from the same lens throughout our career, we will be the same dentist or do the same dentistry throughout our career. And growth minded just doesn't mean economics. It also means satisfaction. It means working less. We've moved to a time in dentistry where busy isn't winning. And our goal
Mm,
shouldn't be to be busy.
definitely, especially after COVID, everyone's priorities changed to, having more meaningful life because, yeah, it's set up right on track. And appreciate that insight as well, Dr. Agarwal, because times do change. Times do
Yeah.
change, and we got to change along with it. Alexis, let's stay on that same machine. For a purchase that size, how can depreciation or bonus depreciation change the short-term tax impact of the investment? And how should that shape the timing of the decision and not just the size of it?
Yes, that one big beautiful bill definitely has kept me very busy because it has gone and restored 100% bonus depreciation for 2026. And you also still have the Section 179 as well. And what that basically means is that $120,000 milling system can now be written off entirely in 1 year. Now, again, most docs will start thinking about towards year end, okay, what else can I be doing in order to save on taxes? Because obviously, a majority of strategies and deductions you have to actually do before December 31st. Now, if you, as I mentioned earlier, if you go and purchase that piece of equipment before December 31st, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get the deduction in that current year. The IRS has a rule called the placed in service rule. So that basically means you can only write off the cost of that machine once you've actually placed that piece of equipment in service. You're actually using it. So if there's again, a ramp up period or like the learning period before you actually start physically using it on your patients, then that you can't write it off during that time. So that's something very important to think about when going to make these purchases. Okay, talk to the person that's selling it to you, say, hey, how long does the training cost? Sorry, how long does this training take? And truly see when you can get that patient in before December 31st for that very first patient, having it available. So you also have to remember too that since you're writing off that machine all in 1 year, that means that any other continuing depreciation isn't going to be available in subsequent years and future years. So that might mean next year, like, oh, now I'm gonna have to buy another piece of equipment. So you have to just be very cognizant of the timing, as well as that, if you're taking 100% bonus depreciation or that Section 179 and writing off entirely in 1 year, that you won't have that big windfall again for the next year unless you purchase something else.
Okay, that's very interesting, Alexis. Now, Eric, from the system side, does the timing question Alexis just raised change when a practice actually should pull the trigger on a purchase like this?
From a system perspective, no, I would say, because I think you need to have a standardized kind of experience independent of kind of the actual investment and timing of what it looks like. I think I mean, there's no when it comes up, for example, take the practice management example, so maybe not outside the milling, which I'm not as in scanner, which I'm not as familiar with. It is there's never probably a great time to switch kind of practice management software or move systems, but the other side is beautiful once you do. And so it's interesting in the last probably 12 to 18 months, we've seen consolidation slow a ton, particularly in the DSO space, where a lot of our customers were continuously buying and trying to integrate practice. It's actually given them a bit of a pause to kind of take a deep breath and really kind of understand how to make their businesses better and drive efficiency. And so the idea of like EBITDA aggregation, which was always the consolidation play, is turned a little bit more into terms like same store growth and EBITDA optimization. And so being on a modern system allows you to do things like that. So it's actually the timing is quite good. But yeah, I personally think you have to get on a modern kind of system in order to scale and to be able to run your business and to stay sane. Like I think that's the hardest thing is when you're on antiquated technology of any variety. It's like and you see the world kind of moving into another, it's not I don't think it's a mentally healthy place maybe to be when you're not necessarily keeping up.
Hey, appreciate that perspective there, Eric. Now, Alexis, before we do shift gears, for anyone weighing a purchase like this in the next 12 months, give us the 2 or 3 things they should put in front of their tax advisor before they sign anything.
Yeah, definitely they'll want to get a quote from the equipment company, not just for the piece of equipment, but any, again, training, licensing, or software fees, excuse me, any other additional pieces of hardware that need to be purchased in order for, I don't know, like even the extension cord if you need it. So you want to make sure that you have a full picture of what the actual purchase is going to be costing. You also want to have, if especially if you're working with somebody new, a year-to-date profit and loss statement and projected net income. We'll want to have an idea of what your tax bracket is, before the purchase, so we can see what the actual write-off will, end up helping lower your overall tax bracket and be able to do that planning. Now, if you already work with somebody and they're providing that proactive tax planning, then they'll obviously have all that information. And I mean, a lot of my clients, they'll just send me an email saying, "Hey, Alexis, we're thinking about buying this. Well, this is how much it costs." And so we just add that into our proactive planning that we have. But then also too, we want to be able to see any financing or lease agreements as well, because if there is financing involved and you're having to pay interest, we want to be able to create that amortization schedule, and that allows us to see what the true cost is of the piece of equipment, not just this year, but in future years as well.
Appreciate that, Alexis. Now we spent half an hour on what technology costs and what it does inside the practice. The next 3 questions will flip the lens because every number we've discussed assumes that somebody is on the chair, the patient is on the chair. So, Dr. Agarwal, there is a difference between a digital tool that saves you chair time and one that becomes a reason a patient picks your practice over the one down the road. When you have seen technology really earn its keep, was it because it cut your costs or because it gave the practice something patients could feel and talk about?
Yeah, for me, it's my whole professional life story is built around technology. Technology has kind of been the horse that has led the way for me, not from a savings perspective, but from a procedural perspective. I started doing single visit crowns because of technology. I started doing dental implants because CBCT. I started making my own guides because of milling and 3D printing. Technology has really led the way for me to expand my clinical scope and clinical career. And so I don't lead with technology from a marketing or building perspective. I lead from a patient comfort, convenience, and predictability of technology. And then my win has been adding procedures to the practice that change. Honestly, changes my hourly and daily revenue. If I'm a single visit crown guy forever, at the end of the day, how many of those can I do in a day? If I can suddenly move to becoming an implant dentist, there's a significant upside there. And for me, technology has been very key in the confidence and the predictability of doing this type of more advanced dentistry.
Wow, that's a very pragmatic answer, Dr. Agarwal, and we appreciate that. Uh, Now, Eric, when you model the return on a digital investment, how much of that return depends on something happening outside the operatory entirely? New patients actually finding the practice and knowing the capability exists. Where does that variable belong in the math, and what happens to the ROI when ownership leaves it out?
It's interesting. I kind of shared Dr. Agarwal's perspective in terms of the technology itself. Software, I don't think software is at a place right now to differentiate many practices based on the patient experience, and that's probably partially the fault of the technology providers, and partially a reason because the DSOs and dentists probably aren't as focused on it as you'd think. There's a world in which the ability to kind of appoint online and change schedules is appealing to a younger generation, but dentistry candidly hasn't really embraced it as much as other industries, as much as I expected. Most of the ROI we see is designed around really two things. Like how do I increase treatment plan acceptance? How do I increase revenue per hour, revenue per chair? And how do I cut costs? And the thing I will say on just the overall ROI related to operatory, non-operatory, and this kind of non-operatory answer is there's a historical lack of trust, I think, within dentistry when it comes to vendor and realizing of that ROI. And that's probably because there's been, well, maybe two large suppliers who've dominated the industry. But there's also just been a lot of vendor and a lot of slow technology change. And so it's really incumbent upon folks like us as technology providers to show that ROI and demonstrate, not only prove that ROI, show that there will be ROI, and then actually go back and show that the ROI was realized, whether it be increased production or reduced cost. And I mean, operatory and operatory aside, I think it's a real critical thing because there's just a lot of scar tissue in dentistry when it comes to stuff like that.
Mhm. And so, do you proactively report back to the practice owner with reports on whether you've hit the goals or exceeded them?
Yeah, so we do have a series of KPIs. We've got a reporting suite. So, and I think some people view kind of the transformation to a single practice management system as more necessary than probably opportunistic. So it's funny, there's not as much requirement on the specific core system conversion because everyone kind of just knows they need to do it. But you take the incremental feature. For example, we just launched voice progress notes, which should hopefully improve chair side kind of our doctor hours. At the end of the day, we're going to have to be able to measure the impact that that has on productivity within, or folks are just going to view it candidly within DSOs as kind of a luxury for their providers to have. And so the add-on individual things that we are trying to incorporate into our software package require a lot clearer ROI discussion.
Okay, appreciate that, Derek. Now, Alex says most break-even models account for costs going down, lab savings, consumables, downtime. Now, far fewer account for production going up. So, whether there are enough of the right patients to feed the equipment. Now, when a doctor builds that model, what is the demand side assumption they almost never write down? And why does the whole calculation wobble without it?
Yeah, most docs assume that their historical volume will perfectly transfer over to the new machine. And so, or that demand will actually increase because they have this new tech. The things that they're not really writing down are that time, basically chair time availability and clinical case acceptance. So, if you've already, especially if this is like a new service, if your chairs are already booked out for, in advance for other services, then it's difficult to bring in new patients to, provide that for a crown, for example, to actually service them. And so there'll be a bit of downtime with that piece of equipment. So it's really important to actually write down, specific marketing and a scheduling plan, and, looking at optimizing the back end so that it doesn't go and choke up the front end, which is basically like the patient flow.
Okay, appreciate that, Alexis. Now, there's been a bit of a through line through our answers here. Every technology decision on this panel assumes that the patients are already there to justify it. And that's a bit of a separate problem from the equipment itself, and it comes down to demand, the right patients finding you, knowing what you offer. And that's exactly what um, a marketing strategy meeting by Eco Marketing is built to address. Here we go. Let me share this with you. Right. So I've got a gift from our team at Echo Marketing for everyone joining us today, a complimentary one-on-one marketing strategy meeting designed specifically for dental practice owners. Now, this session is built to answer one key question. When patients in your city search for services like implant dentist near me, perhaps same-day crowns, digital dentures, or any of the higher value services your practice provides, does your practice show up as the trusted choice? Um, Now, in your strategy session, you will sit down with a senior marketing analyst who already works with thriving dental clinics across the globe, and you'll get a free live audit of how your practice can attract more of your ideal patients, build your reputation, and grow sustainably. Now, the analyst will spend several hours researching your visibility for the services that matter most to your production goals, your reputation signals, and the gaps that may be keeping patients from finding you. They'll come to the call ready to walk you through a custom recommendations just for your practice and your market. So, if today has made you think about your next technology purchase, your digital workflow, or whether there is enough patient demand to support the investment, well, this session is designed to help you answer that question and fix anything that is not quite working. It's usually a $900 value session, completely complimentary for you as an attendee tonight. So you will see a QR code on your screen. You can scan that with your phone to book your session or check the chat for a direct link. It takes less than a minute to book. And availability is limited because every audit involves real research into your local market. So perhaps here is how to think about an offer like this. What's the risk if you say yes? Honestly, it'll just be your time. There's no obligation whatsoever. But what's the risk if you do not? Well, you might be missing out on something that could help you make smarter technology decisions, attract the right patients, and grow your practice with more confidence in 2026 and beyond. So I'll leave that with you. But truly, I encourage you to grab this opportunity, book your session with Equa. It'll be time well spent. Right. Um, Now then, let's get into some of our attendees' questions because we had a question from one of our attendees here. Let me pull that up real quick. Thomas has asked us when buying cloud-based software, buying cloud-based software, it's important that can be treated as CapEx versus OpEx, even though it's monthly. This is important. Alexis, do you have any thoughts on this?
No.
Okay. I think it's a bit of the sharing of thoughts instead of a particular question. Okay. Eric, do you?
No, I think, but I do think what Tommy's asking is, so either whether it be license maintenance software where you buy a license and the maintenance, or there's a subscription software, which cloud-based software, is there a way to capitalize the software itself in order to basically maximize EBITDA? I don't know, Alexis, if you have any thoughts on that. I don't actually know the answer for that. We've had some people ask us that because they prefer, obviously, with the lender relationships and stuff, to have better better lender coverage, interest coverage, and stuff. They want to put it below the line, but not necessarily. I don't have a good tax answer.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for that clarification, Eric. I appreciate it. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking about like a more of a desktop software versus like a SaaS type model software.
Yeah,
Is that
probably
correct?
both. Yeah,
Okay.
we do SaaS, so a lot of people ask us, and we've not come up with a good answer. So I'd actually be curious if we
Yeah.
have a good answer. But I think it's either way is our way to capitalize it.
Got it. Got it. Generally, no, not with the SaaS type model where you're paying like a monthly fee. That's just going to be a normal annual kind of or monthly expense. If you're able to maybe strike some sort of deal with the company and say, hey, look, I will prepay my software maintenance fees for a 3-year period if you give me a 10% discount, then you may do that whole payment at once for like a 3-year period. Then, going and being able to capitalize that in more in 1 year, then that gives you a little bit bigger of a deduction. But again, very similar to doing bonus depreciation. You're getting a nice big chunk in 1 year, but then you're losing out on the deduction in future years. So I really like to take a look at what your plans are in future years in terms of growth and other pieces of equipment you're having to buy. Maybe you're looking at purchasing your building or building your own building or doing some sort of build out within a building that you're leasing. And so those have other those are other tax strategies and other tax deductions that will say, well, you know what? I'm going to have all these other things that I can take advantage of. And so this year, I really want to maximize the software deduction.
So it's really important to look at the bigger picture, even when questions like this arise. We appreciate Thomas for sending us that question, and I truly appreciate Eric for really clarifying it a little bit. Appreciate that, Eric. It's a team effort. And thank you very much, Alexis, for that answer. Thomas, we do hope you got the answer you were looking for. If not, please do ask a follow-up. Now, Dr. Agarwal, same-day crown rate is a number a practice can pull monthly. What does that number need to do, and over what time window before you can call the equipment genuinely productive?
Yeah, again, my answer is not going to be traditional on this, is because it's harder and harder to. What are you what are you really saving when I can send it to the lab for $80 and I can make it in the office? It's not the right answer today. That worked 10 years ago, 15 years ago, certainly 25 years ago. That was the right answer. But obviously the answer should be, I think what we should look at is why are we doing big fillings? It's technology should allow us to do more appropriate restorations. It should allow us to showcase what our patients are seeing. We've moved to a land where scanners allow us to replace cameras to be able to show patients what's going on in 3 dimensions. But to answer your question directly, obviously the number should be going up. It should be getting to the point where, for me, what I look for is, how do I get every restoration made in the office? And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, what do I got to do to not send anything outside of my 4 walls? It still has costs, even if we make it in the office. There are costs of those things, but how do we make it outside of the office? Now, there's 2 ways I can look at the question. One was if it's about single visit restorations, or as if it's about conversion of same day dentistry, like somebody comes in and now you want to do it that same day. Yeah, those are 2 different things that we would probably look at and answer differently.
Okay. Let's take that one step at a time then,
Yeah.
but do answer it. So what would your answer be for if it was single visits?
Single visit dentistry, again, my answer is going to be every crown, every restoration. How do I get it made in the office? That is ultimately, you bought this machine to do that. And so, for example, if I look back at my career, the back teeth posterior restorations was super easy to get done in the office. Where I started struggling was on anterior restorations. And so for me, that was a learned skill of how do I match teeth. It wasn't that the
Mm.
machine couldn't make the teeth, it's I couldn't match the teeth. So we had to learn how to match the teeth. And then the second thing that started coming up, next roadblock or barrier, was how do I do multiple teeth at one time? Doing one tooth at a time is honestly, it's child's play at this point in time, but being able to do multiple teeth at one time is the next ceiling. So, this goes to ongoing training, ongoing expectations, and changing your patient mix of the dentistry that you're doing.
Mm. And then when it comes to conversions of the same day?
Yeah, so convert again, my philosophy is very different. I don't believe in same day dentistry. It's not how
Okay.
I built my practice. That to me becomes a transactional relationship.
Mm.
So if and that's a great way to make a living, but it's not the living that we choose to make at our office.
Mm. Okay. Mm. Appreciate that, Dr. Agarwal. Was it, I'm just curious, very shortly,
Mhm.
briefly, was it the same case when you started back in 2000, or did that philosophy changed over time with regards
Yeah,
to the same?
yeah, it's changed tremendously over time. And looking back, I'm glad it's changed over time. One, you reach a point in your life where you're no longer in survival phase. When I was in survival phase, it was come one, come all. What do I got to do to pay the bills? But if you never leave that mentality, you will never leave survival phase. And for me, reaching that point where I said, "Hey, I got to make X dollars a month to pay my bills," and then I became very selective. I did what it took. I ran hard, did everything I took to get to that break-even point. And then after that, I became selective about the dentistry I did. And then what I found was that I got to be able to be more selective, more selective, more selective over time. So looking back, I'm very glad that that philosophy of mine changed.
Appreciate that, Dr. Agarwal. Now, Eric, a practice is 12 months post cloud migration and still cannot tell if the system improved anything. What operational questions should ownership have been able to answer on day one that would have prevented that
On day one.
on day one?
So I think you need to be set up to, because I think in day one you probably are not going to be able to see an improvement. In fact, you're probably going to see a bit of a degradation performance just because of the change associated with it. People aren't familiar with the system and such. But I think you need to look at production and collection trends. You need to look at daily numbers. So if the schedule, like they're always going to want a lighter schedule when you convert software because you're not going to want to put the pressure on the practice. But in 2 or 3 weeks' time, if you're not back up to your standard average daily production and your collection numbers don't look right, your treatment plan acceptance isn't right, then I think then in that situation you have a broader problem about change management. Oh, over time, like say 12 months later, you should be prepared to measure like what am I spending like per FTE when it comes to do RCM. It's a constant metric that the DSOs we try to get the DSOs to think about is like if I'm centralized in a call center, centralized in an RCM function, like how many people does it take me to do that for the practices? And when you're centralized on one system, you should be able to share fee schedules and insurance plans, do eligibility. So at the end of the day, you should show some efficiency there. And so like that's a key metric to track. So we try to set them up on day one, less to measure anything on day one because day one is a bit of a dumpster fire always. But in 12 months, it's like what are the things to make sure that our reputation as a good technology partner is intact, that you've made the right decision. It's the key metrics around things like that. And some of those things we can report on, which are like obviously production, treatment plan acceptance, all those type of things. The cost side of things, which is labor, we don't have visibility into. So we have to we say, look, at the end of the day, this site you might restructure. But it's more about setting the expectation of what the long term things. But the other thing I would say is like, and then back to the idea of like clear ROI. It's tough, but I think there's becoming this, particularly amongst DSOs in dental. Like if you want to eventually transact and you want a private equity sponsor, someone to come buy your business, it's becoming more table stakes to be standardized. It doesn't have to be our software. It doesn't even have to be cloud-based software in some cases, but it needs to be one software because it's very difficult to operate a 20 to 50 to 100 location DSO if you've got 10 different practice management software. So the ROI isn't necessarily driving the conversation on the conversion as much as probably you think. Although we do set them up to obviously track some of those things, it's more around, hey, look, get on a platform because it allows you to present your business appropriately when you want to sell it. But it also allows you to operate and scale your business if you want to grow it.
Appreciate that, Eric. Yeah, Figuring it out ROI, especially with regards to efficiency, might be a tough ask. But when you mention it, with regards to DSOs, it it's really interesting getting on table stakes to really standardize the operation. Yeah,
I
I
have a
love it.
comment on this,
Yeah,
if you don't
please,
mind.
Dr. Agarwal, please.
We made a cloud software change maybe a year and a half ago. And what I will say, what I've seen, number one, it is a dumpster fire for more than one day.
We're working on it being less of one, but still, yeah.
Yeah, I think, look, the dumpster fire isn't always the data, it's the change for the team members when they're used to one screen looking like one thing, and the dentist is sitting in the back. You're like, why can't you get this figured out when most of us don't even know how the hell to use the software to begin with, So, what I want to point out to individual practice owners out there is something that Eric said that is very important that was missed for me on much of my career was this concept of RCM, or revenue cycle management, which is not a word that most private dentists understand, and that is your accounts receivables is pure profit. Because you've covered the cost of doing your business, you paid everybody, and so anything that any piece of technology or software can do to minimize that number or to cycle that number faster, it's directly to the bottom line. And so that is an important part of any technology and software, is to work through your accounts receivable, because that's money you paid for, and you deserve that money, you own that money, and it's money that goes directly to your pocket.
That's a great point.
That's a great point. RCMs. On Tire Dennis, we do have some panels just dedicated to that topic specifically. And yeah, it's really interesting because when we take into consideration insurance as well, um, oh yeah, I'm not going to get into that because it's a whole next level can of worms. But please, that's all the more reason for you to keep following Try Dennis and keep attending our webinars. So Alexis, lab costs as a percentage of collections is a number most practice owners can pull quarterly. Now, what does movement in that number actually confirm about a digital investment, and what does it miss?
Yeah, it accurately confirms that your external lab costs are decreasing. Because when you go and implement the technology, you're obviously using that, and it's not physically, excuse me, there are overall lab costs are decreasing because you're no longer outsourcing. But what it does miss is your internalized overhead, and that there are costs that are going to increase as well. So supplies, for example, that will increase because you now have this machine that you need to put stuff into. And then labor costs are going to go up as well. Time assistants or docs spend, designing, staining, basically just working the machine instead of actually seeing the patients. And then, of course, you now have that software maintenance fees that you didn't have before. So you have to go and not only look at the lab costs, but that are the outsourced lab costs, but you also have to look at the total technology costs as well as a percentage of collections to see the true effect, the net effect of the adoption of this technology.
Okay. Appreciate that answer, Alexis. And we really do hope that our practice owners listening in take some good notes and really look at their external lab costs if they're decreasing. If not, well, you might not be doing the work that you wanted to do. Now, there was a question in the chat from Beth for T-Bone, I'm assuming for all the panelists here. Are you finding a difference in the adoption of technology based on generational differences? Are younger dentists adopting technology faster than older established dentists? Dr. Agarwal, can you start us off on this?
Hi, Beth. How are you? So It's a good question. Here's what I think. Okay, I think younger dentists are more apt to use technology because they're not nearly as afraid of technology. I will argue that younger dentists aren't using it as much as seasoned dentists because, frankly speaking, because most of them aren't owners and they don't have a vested interest in it. So we're seeing more and more on the group dentistry side, on the DSO corporate side, whatever we want to call it. They struggle to implement technology because most of their offices are run by younger dentists. So there's that challenge there. But they're more apt and they can figure it out quicker. It's just a matter of whether or not they choose to engage in more technologically oriented dentistry. They need to. I mean, it's not going away.
Right. Alexis, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I've definitely seen, in our practice, a increase in technology and, the sort of equipment, with probably docked, about, mid to late 30s to mid 50s. Like there, I see that adoption a lot more. But we also work primarily with those that own their business. And so I do want to have that little disclaimer. So that's where we're seeing a lot more investment into this sort of technology. And the adoption has, as far as I know, has gone well. They're continuing to use it. I see their revenues going up, and we're helping them with making sure that they're to keep an eye on costs so that, they are optimizing that service.
Right. Eric, any last thoughts?
First of all, a fantastic question from Beth. Thank you, Beth, for that. Actually, I work with Beth, so thanks, Beth. But no, I think is when you're talking about, it makes sense. When you're talking about investment required technology for CapEx, like it does, you need to see a clear return to yourself, not just to practice it. When it comes to technology itself, we've seen a good example is probably diagnostic AI. I think we've probably seen I would guess we've seen a higher adoption and openness to that amongst younger dentists and older dentists because maybe distrust of things. So I think on that side there is a little bit. Maybe there's more openness to like cloud-based practice management, less fear initially of cloud-based practice management software, this cloud thing. Where's my data type thing that 10 years ago used to be kind of everyone's concern. But I think it's changing. I think it's becoming more ubiquitous and part of the overall conversation. And there's a lot of technology curiosity in dentistry. This is being relatively new, probably relative to everyone on the call to dentistry. 10 years, so not that new, but it's like if you go, there's just a lot of interest in what's going on. There's a lot to be done, a lot of adoption that still needs to take place, and a lot of baseline kind of improvement when it comes to technology. But there's seemingly no lack of interest in getting better and using technology to do it.
Okay. Appreciate that, Eric.
I'll agree
No,
with what Eric said on the AI component. We've seen in the practices that we work with, the younger practices are much more quick to adopt AI diagnostics than someone of my age, although I've been pretty quick because we have our way of doing it. We're distrustful, and most of us of my generation, we want to let cavities grow till they're a little bit bigger and do them versus catching them early. Seems like.
right. Right. Appreciate the answers over there. And Beth, appreciate the question. It really brought some very interesting answers, insight into the behavior that's happening right now with younger dentists moving into DSO space more than ever. And yeah, it's an interesting time to be in dentistry for sure, especially on the tech side of things. Now, as we are coming to the home stretch, I want to ask each of you one quick rapid fire golden rule for a practice owner making a digital dentistry investment this year. Dr. Agarwal, can you start us off? The
Yeah,
golden
like if
rule.
it's not going to be, if you are you going to ask me some of them, or did I just
No, no,
make
no,
whatever I
no, no,
want
no.
up?
Golden rule. It's the golden rule, the key takeaway.
Key takeaway. Yeah, look, technology is a team affair. If it's dentist driven, it's going to have a ceiling. You're going to hit that ceiling very quickly. If it's a whole practice decision, it will help grow your people, grow your team, grow your revenue.
We appreciate that, Dr. Agarwal. Alexis?
Yep. Good tried and true. Don't let the tax tail wag the dog. Make sure that you're not purchasing something for the sake of a deduction, and that this piece of equipment or technology is actually going to improve your business and make you money or, increase efficiencies.
There we go. Eric.
Those are both great ones and hard to top. So I'd say from a software, particularly practice management software perspective, know who you're buying your software. It's a long-term decision. Dumpster fire, root canal, however you describe switching software, like you don't want to do it more than once. And so make sure you know the company, make sure you talk to people that use the software, make sure that you have a good sense of where the company's going because it's a partnership, and it's one you want to get right.
Appreciate that, Eric. Right. That being said, I do want to remind our attendees real quickly, if the patients, your ideal patients in your area are searching for the treatments that you offer, make sure you're the practice that is found, liked, and chosen. Go ahead and book that marketing strategy meeting with Echo Marketing to get insight on where you're at in terms of digital presence. The link is being dropped in the chat one last time. The QR code is there on the screen for you to go ahead and scan and book that meeting. So here we are at the end of the session. Before I wrap things up, I do want to remind you, the CE form, I do believe will be dropped in the chat right now. Please do make sure to complete it. And give us 2 to 3 weeks to get back to you with your credit. If you don't hear anything back from us within 3 weeks, please do reach out because it's really important for us to ensure that you receive your due CE. And of course, if you don't get to the chat in time right now, don't worry, we'll send you a link in your email. Just take, I do believe, a week. You had to fill it within a week for you to be eligible for that CE credit generated off of this event. With that being said, another thing, a feedback form will pop out as you exit this webinar. If you can take 30 seconds to fill it out and let us know how we did, it would be much appreciated because it'll help us really know what you are looking for and how we can better our events for the next time around. Right. Dr. Agarwal, Eric, Alexis, thank you so much for your time, your experience, your insights. It's been a pleasure and privilege to host this session on behalf of the Thriving Dentist. With that being said, until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.